Good morning and welcome to the Hoosier Huddle podcast. I'm Sammy Jacobs, and we are here for our mailbag. But first, we have some updates on the site. I am proud to announce that we are part of the Believe Network for podcasts. So this is our first Believe podcast to go around. So if you're looking for podcasts, they have a ton of stuff on all sports, and then you could usually find our stuff where the usual places on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all that stuff. They just help us with distribution, guests, and all that stuff. It has been a great partnership so far. So check them out at Believe. That is BLEAV.com. Believe. And we're here for our mailbag episode. I want to thank the readers both on social media and on our forums for sending in some questions. We're going to hit Indiana football. We're going to hit basketball. We're going to talk about Jeff Mercer and what needs to happen there with Indiana baseball. So, first up, we are going to talk about the high school recruiting class. This question comes from Hurrying Hoosiers on our message boards over at HoosierHuddle.com. Come join our message boards. They are free for everybody. Sign up, join. It's a great community so far. How many players can we expect in the 2027 recruiting class for football? How do you see the ratio of transfers to high school recruits changing going forward, given Signetti saying he prefers a more high school focused approach? But there must be some pull from the portal given the success he has found there as well. Each year it has gone down, and Hurrying Hoosiers put this in his question on the board too. In 2024, 31 transfers, 17 high school recruits. 2025, it was 50-50. 23 transfers, 23 high school recruits. 2026, 17 transfers, 22 high school recruits. How do I see it playing out this year? Talking to people around recruiting, seems like it's going to be a smaller class on both sides. A lot of it's going to depend on if some of these underclassmen jump to the NFL and who transfers out and things like that. But right now, as the roster stands, it'll probably be 18 high school recruits, 18 transfers. We'll see. There are a lot of key pieces in there that'll determine what goes where. For example, Tyler Cherry is a key piece to the future at the quarterback position. If he could come in and he looked good at spring, but he has not played in a football game in about 2 years. So, can he be the guy who takes over after Josh Hoover? If it does, then you only really need one experienced backup quarterback out of the portal. You lose Grant Wilson, you lose Josh Hoover, you do bring in Jamison Purcell, but he'll be a true freshman. Jacob Bell looked good in spring ball. So those are the positions where if Tyler Cherry can be the next guy in line, then instead of taking true transfer quarterbacks, you could take one and go get maybe another high school position. I don't know if they'll do quarterback. Quarterback recruiting is really changed with the portal because instead of going, hey, we need a quarterback every year or every other year, whatever the coach's plan is, guys don't really stick around all that much after 1 or 2 years. They want to play, they want to get on the field, and if they don't have a path to play, they bounce to a place where they do have a place to play. So I do think it'll be more of a 50-50, and you could see the pattern going a little bit more high school classes because you don't have to rebuild the roster through the portal. This year kind of went back to that. You got 17 guys in the top transfer portal class, but you had Omar Cooper leave a year on the table. D'Angelo Pons left a year on the table, and they all know that this is coming and things like that because they're organized and they know what they're doing. But those are guys who you kind of want a veteran to plug in there that maybe the high school guy you recruited a year or two ago isn't really ready enough to step into place. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But with 15 guys in NFL training camps, some of them underclassmen. That's where you'll see if underclassmen jump to the NFL, that's where you'll see portal fills instead of high school fills. If you have, underclassmen stay, it gives you a chance to keep those freshmen, redshirt them, or develop them how you want to do it, give them some time to develop, and that's going forward. So, rules change too. We'll see what happens with all this. 5 years to play five, which I like. It just simplifies everything. And then if there's a one-time transfer rule, things are very fluid in college football. So you might have, if those rules go forward, you might have bigger high school classes down the road than transfer portal classes. So, next question is coming from IU Gradman. Is the 2026 team better than last year's team? I hear conflicting views. Signetti said he thinks the defense is ahead of the last two. There were some key losses, but the transfer portal class looks good, and there is a solid core of returners. This is a great question because you can't really do better than IU did in 2025. They went 16-0. They played 16 games, won them all, won the national title, won 95% of their games in really convincing fashion. Now there's still going to be some haters out there who say that they were a group of mercenaries who were 25 years old and things like that, or Fernando Mendoza is a RPO guy. Look, Indiana went 16-0. You could get in your feelings about it however you want. I don't really care. But can the 2026 team be better? So I said this last year coming off of 2024 because it's kind of, yes, Indiana did not win the national title in 2024, but they went 11-2, had the best season in program history to date. And coming off of it is like, man, how can they be better? Well, they were better in 2025, and going into that was they had a better roster. Now, we didn't say that they would go 16-0 because the schedule was more difficult, and you had road games at Iowa, Oregon, Penn State, and things like that. But if you look at the roster and the depth, yes, you lose guys like D'Angelo Ponce, who will be very tough to replace. Fernando Mendoza, you're not going to replace that kind of like just what he brought to the team, and not just the skills on the field. I think the intangibles he brought to this team are so undervalued by a lot of people. Um, it just how he galvanized the team, brought them together. That locker room was super close, and that you know that made up for maybe the talent gap in some teams. With Indiana, was that, man, this team was just clicking on all cylinders. They executed super well. They played for each other. They were super close, and that's what put them over the top. It really made them a great team. It's tough to replace that. That is something that doesn't happen often. And even if Josh Hoover puts up numbers like Fernando, can he bring the team together like that? It's different guys. It's you go through different, that kind of rapport is built in practice. It's built in spring ball. It's built in fall camp when you're absolutely miserable and it's whatever 100 degrees and humid in Bloomington, and you're going through all of that together. And those are the inside jokes of practice. The hey, let's watch film together. What, like, that's what Fernando brought. That's what I think is going to be the toughest to replace. You do lose Pat Coogan. You do lose guys along the defensive line like Mikhail Kamara. Aiden Fisher was the heart and soul of the defense. You lose a guy like Lou Moore, who was excellent. Led the team in interceptions. But the depth of this team coming into 2026, I think, is their strength. You bring in the number one portal class to Bloomington, according to On3. Josh Hoover's thrown, accounted for over 70 touchdowns in his career. Yes, he has turned the ball over some. Yes, he didn't look great in the spring game, but neither did Curtis Rourke or Fernando Mendoza. And you saw how those guys turned out as the process went along. And I think what people need to remember here is that it's a process. Um, you know, the team that Indiana runs out for spring practice one or the spring game is not going to be the team that Indiana, puts out game one and then game two and game three and stuff like that. The last 2 years, we've had so many people on social media, on our message boards, just freak out over the lack of impressiveness over the first game. I remember walking into the media room after the win over ODU, and there are reporters saying, "Well, this team's going 8-4 or 7-5 at best, and they're not a college football playoff team, and this is a joke." Like, I get the hot take culture of the new media, but you gotta. It is a 12-game season. Is this team better than last year? In places, it could be. The offensive line, you do lose Pat Coogan, but you bring back Bray Lynch, Drew Evans. You bring in Joe Brunner from Wisconsin, who was an all Big Ten player. Carter Smith, who's an All American, top lineman in the Big Ten last year. He was the Big Ten's most valuable lineman, or whatever they call that award. He's back. You have Mola Johnny coming back as well after playing some big time minutes late in the season in some important games. And then you're building depth too. Guys like Baylor Wilkin, Austin Lebfried, and we'll get into those a little bit more on another question. The depth is better. And now you're seeing those redshirt freshmen, redshirt sophomores who need to step up and play well if they want to continue their future with IU. Now's the time that they get to do that. Now you're counting on, okay, we didn't need to go get 3 linemen from the transfer portal. We got one, and we're going to plug in some of these young guys who should be ready to play. And that goes on the defense too. Indiana's defensive line is, they brought in some edge rushers who look very, very good. From Kansas State, Notre Dame. We didn't even get to see Josh Burnham in the spring very much because he was hobbled. But the two guys from Kansas State played well. You bring back Tyreek Tucker and Mario Landino, so that you feel good about the defensive line, and then some of these younger defensive line are ready to step up too. And Signetti and his defensive staff are not afraid to throw in a true freshman. They're not going to, unless he blows the doors off, or is not going to start. But look at Mario Landino and his path to playing time with IU. He was a rotational player. He came in as a true freshman, was a rotational player, played some big minutes, and then as a true sophomore, he, he had a great playoff, and he was, he didn't start all the time, but he was one of those key rotational guys who you put in and counted on in big moments. Now he's going to be a true junior, and he's going to start. And that, I think, is the blueprint for it. The depth is there. Linebacker, you bring back, we'll talk about this in a little bit as well, but you bring back 2 starters there with Elijah Hardy and Isaiah Jones. Yes, you lose Aiden Fisher, but it's not like you're replacing him with a guy who hasn't been at IU, doesn't know the defense, and hasn't worn the green dot before. That's what Isaiah Jones has done. In the secondary, yes, you lose Pons, but you get another year Jamari Sharp. AJ Harris is a former 5-star guy who comes in from Penn State. He didn't play in the spring game. Yes, D'Angelo Pons is an athletic freak and an all-American player, and he proved that, but it's not like you're replacing him with a 2-star guy or a no-star guy. You're bringing in some talent there. Jalen Bell looked he had his up and down moments in the spring game as well. Carson Williams comes in from Montana State. He's a guy who could play. And, then you have some guys who've kind of been waiting in the wings who might get their opportunity. Rylan Gandy from Pitt. He stepped in for Pons against Iowa. They trusted him enough to do the secondary calls in that game. And yet, Iowa's not a modern offense. They're not going to throw the ball for 400 yards. Uh, but to have a guy come off the bench kind of last minute, because that injury I think happened late in the week. Um, to the point where the Indiana had to change their defensive game plan at the last minute. But to have Rylan Gandy come in at the last minute, trust him and have him prepared enough to do the secondary calls is great. Byron Baldwin's healthy. You're going to get another year out of him. He looks really good. He showed what he could do last year when healthy as well, when he came back from injury. Um, then you have, and he'll play Rover. Amari Farrell's back. You bring in Preston Zachman at safety as well, who's a smart defender. He's one of those like what we called Riley Nowakowski last year. It's like, yeah, of course he went to Wisconsin and played fullback. That's who he is. Um, Preston Zachman is that as a safety at Wisconsin. They always have these smart physical dudes at safety, and that's what Preston Zachman is. The running back room is loaded. Wide receiver room is arguably the best in the Big Ten. So is the roster better? In most places, yes. In some places, no. It's tough to replace a D'Angelo Pons, Riley Nowakowski and tight end, which they're going young with. And then, for just the impact of a guy like Pat Coogan, um, Kalon Black and Roman Hemby as well. Although I do think Kobe Martin and Lee Beebe Jr. and Turbo Richard can absolutely fill that hole. This team might be better on paper, roster talent wise. Will they go 16-0? I don't know. There is so much. You're coming off, a season that spills over. You have the spoils of victory. Yes, Sig has their, humble and hungry, but how you react to those, and he said it yesterday at the White House, how you react to losing and adversity is going to be huge. Now, the simple answer is, well, just don't lose. They didn't lose last year, and they haven't lost since December of 2024. But at some point in time, they're going to get hit with adversity, and they're going to have to respond the way that Fernando Mendoza and that team responded. Because every time they got hit with the adversity, they punched back. Iowa, Penn State, or at Oregon, Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. Even with Miami coming back, every time Miami bunched back, Indiana kept them, at arm's length away as well. So can they replicate that? That is the big question. Let's get into some linebacker depth question. This is a great question. It is. There's going to be some young guys. The future of the linebacker class is on campus. And I think that's Jacob Savage, Henry Olinger, and Jaden Williams. Those guys are the future. But you still have Elijah Hardy and Isaiah Jones, who are two all Big Ten linebackers. Now, young guys who could step up to this question, and this question is coming from IU grad man as well. The missing spring practice for a freshman coming in, I think, is a big deal. You don't get the reps on there. So even if you participated in some of it and didn't participate in others of it, I do think it takes a hit and kind of slows down your progression. Jacob Savage played all of spring practice. You also have PJ Nelson coming in his second year behind him as well. The hope is that you could have Henry Olinger and Jaden Williams. Jaden Williams, if you told me 3 months ago who was the guy who's going to step in, I thought it'd be him. He has the physical tools and the instincts and just the player profile to be one of those freshmen who plays on special team, does like the Charlie Becker, Davion Chandler route, plays on special teams, makes some plays, and does spot linebacker duty. But as far as depth, you're going to have, your two starters in Bones Jones and Elijah Hardy. Behind him, Caden Turner, who I thought had a really good year last year. he needs to stay healthy. And when he made that great play at Maryland, got hurt, and your heart just sinks for the kid. But he came back. He's on the field in a lot of uh, big situations. You go to the Big Ten championship game, and Aiden Fisher kind of gets banged up. They put Caden Turner in. He makes the defense makes a stop, and that's instead of taking a timeout and getting Aiden Fisher back in, they threw Caden Turner out there. Um, I believe it was either third and goal. It might have been the pass play before the missed field goal. Down there in the end zone where Elijah Hardy broke it up. But Caden Turner's in there for Aiden Fisher. And then you have PJ Nelson, who is a redshirt freshman. He's in there for depth. Jacob Savage had a nice spring game. We'll see what he could do. If you could go into the season with 5 or 6 linebackers, that's already deeper than last year going into the season. So that is the linebacker room. Is there a defensive end who can move just in case to linebacker? Maybe, especially if they want to play 3. Um, you have Quentin Clark there, who's played linebacker in the past, but he's better as an edge rusher. Um, I don't think any of the transfers coming in. They're super athletic freaks. I don't think that they're a fit for a linebacker. You might have them play that stand-up rush position that kind of looks like you're playing 3 linebackers, but I don't think they're going to be like last year when you're throwing Aiden Fisher, Isaiah Jones, and Elijah Hardy. And they did that only because those were the 3 best, 3 of the better defensive players and gave you your best defensive lineup. Their best defensive lineup this year might be with 4 down linemen and 2 linebackers and 5 in the secondary. But we'll see. You also have Byron Baldwin. I think when looking at who can play linebacker too, Byron Baldwin could play that rover position and kind of act like a smaller linebacker, smaller, more athletic linebacker who he could hit. Everybody talks about Pons' pick 6 setting the tone. Byron Baldwin lit up that kick returner on the opening kickoff. That lit the fuse. D'Angelo Pons' pick 6 was the boom. Byron Baldwin's hit on that kickoff was the fuse that got that party started. Because there was a palpable buzz after that hit. Let's look at offensive line depth. This question comes from this question. I forgot who it came from, and I had it written down. Also IU grad man. Sorry, buddy. Who are the 2 best backup linemen and lineman depth? Indiana was without a bunch of linemen during spring practice. Carter Smith didn't play. Bray Lynch was limited. Those are 2 of your starters. And things like that, which in reality is kind of a blessing in disguise. Does Carter Smith need to go through spring practice? No. Would I have liked him to be able to lift? And, the difference between rehabbing an injury and building up for the next season is just that. You're building back to where you were instead of building up. We'll see what the offseason program, Carter Smith should be back to normal soon. He said after the spring game, it's still a couple of weeks until he could really lift and do those things. But he really doesn't need the repetitions in spring practice. Bray Lynch, had some loose bodies cleaned up in his ankle, which seem absolutely like that sounds so gross. But he missed time at center. But that was a chance for Indiana to work different guys at center. You had Austin Lebfried, Drew Evans moved over there. It's Sig said you're looking for your best 5. And then you're figuring out where the best 5 go. And that, I think, in the spring, now you can look at depth as well. Baylor Wilkin played for Carter Smith. He didn't play in the spring game either. He got banged up, but he got some valuable reps early in spring. Austin Lebfried also got valuable reps. Johnny is still a young guy. He's probably going to start, but he's still a young guy that needed those reps in the spring. So looking at some of the younger players, I don't think you're going to see a true freshman or a redshirt freshman um, offensive lineman thrown in there. Maybe besides Baylor Wilkin, but you just don't see that. As far as will they get reps in the season, the history says not really. You know, let's say Indiana, I think IU grad man said 7 blowouts. Indiana has blown out a lot of people. And one of the knocks that some people have on one of the few knocks they have on Signetti, or the only knock they have on Signetti, is that he doesn't play his depth in these blowouts a lot of the times. Um, I don't see how that changes. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But I don't see guys like getting taken out all that much. Maybe because this line has been together a little bit longer, you'll see guys like Austin Lebfried, Baylor Wilkin come in. Samuel Simpson had a good spring camp. Matt Merrick as well. So maybe you have those guys get some reps. You also have to. The redshirt rule also moves to 9 games this year, I believe. And so now instead of, oh man, do I want to burn a guy's red shirt by playing him in a blowout game when I might need him later in the season if somebody goes down? That question goes out the window too. So hopefully, hopefully those rule changes get IU to, and look, we can't predict the blowouts as much as anybody else, but you would think that over the first 3 games you should have a nice runway to get some of these younger offensive linemen in the game late. Um, could they not blow everybody out? Sure. That changes things too. It's just a very fluid situation. But I would, if you're looking for young linemen to keep an eye on, Austin Lebfried, who's a redshirt sophomore. You have Baylor Wilkin, who is a redshirt freshman. And then you have the third guy I would have is Matt Merrick, who is also a redshirt freshman. We'll see those guys. We'll see how they do. We'll see if Carter Smith's ready for the season. Hopefully he is. All indications point to that he'll be healthy. What are the differences between 2025 and 2026 Indiana? This one is coming from Ginger Martin, one of our newest members over on the board. I think I've gone in depth a lot on this question already. But you know, looking at the differences, I mean, there's a lot. You got to replace a ton. Fernando Mendoza can do some things that Josh Hoover can't, and Josh Hoover can do some things that Fernando Mendoza struggled at. You do have, I think, the running back room's a little bit deeper with Lee Beebe coming back from injury. The wide receiver room could be better. You lose a guy like Eliza Surratt, who was so good at catching the ball and so reliable. Same with Omar Cooper catching the ball and getting upfield and breaking tackles and being that big. I don't want to call him a big play receiver because he didn't go for like 60, 70 yards each time, but he was a big money down receiver. Anytime IU needed a third down, touchdown, fourth down conversion, Omar Cooper is usually the guy they went to. And he usually got the job done. Again, it's those intangible things that are tough to replace. And I think that's the difference. You bring in Nick Marsh, who's as good as anybody in the Big Ten. Charlie Becker proved himself last year. He was our sleeper pick of the year last year, to the point where I almost told the staff, you can't pick Charlie Becker. It's too obvious. Davion Chandler could play in that role this year. The kid from Tyler Morris coming back from injury in Michigan, I think gives you a guy who's super dynamic and in the slot where you kind of that's kind of the difference on offense is that you have a guy like Tyler Morris who's going to be like Miles Price, um, can turn a 5 yard pass into a 40-yard gain, and give you a ton in the punt return game. Um, special teams might be a little different too. We saw Patty McAteer and Nico Radicic have a great spring game with their range, but Brandon Frankie was so good for 3 quarters of the season that we took for granted his touchback. Now Quinn Warren did a nice job, and some of the other guys did a nice job. Can Patty McAteer get into that? I think Billy Goins, from what I've heard, has a bigger leg than Mitch McCarthy. Although Mitch McCarthy did a great job and is one of the reasons why IU won that national championship game was his ability to punt. Um, and things like that. So the difference, I don't know if we're going to know the difference between the 2025 team and the 2026 team until they get on the field because the 2025 team had it. They had it. Every time that they looked like they might lose, whether it was the pick six at Oregon, the game at Iowa, Penn State coming down to that final drive where you took a sack with a minute and a half left and you're facing a 2nd and 17. They responded. Does this team have it? That I think is going to be the biggest difference. Let's get into some Indiana basketball questions now. So we're going to switch gears, go to basketball. And this one comes from Hiring the Hoosiers as well. He sent in one basketball, one football question, so I appreciate that. How much pressure is on DeVries this upcoming season now that we have bought him a roster that appears talented and more balanced on paper? We said this once the season ended, and Indiana failed to make the NCAA tournament. The pressure on Darren DeVries has skyrocketed. Now it is gone to the moon with the expansion of the NCAA tournament to 76 teams. You have, the excuses last year were we came in late in the spring. We didn't have time to throw a roster together that, we really, really wanted. Some pieces were different. Maybe the scouting report on some pieces, like a guy like Reed Bailey, was different than what you got. You thought that some, lower conference players of the year could translate to the Big Ten. And there was a point in time where that was kind of true. Indiana was 17-9. They beat Purdue at home. They beat UCLA, and everybody's feeling pretty good. You're coming off a football national championship. You're like, 17-9. We should make the NCAA tournament. And then the back half of the season happened. You saw the depth issues. You saw the fatigue. You saw just the lack of skill come through. And they missed the NCAA tournament. Once that happened, the pressure went through the roof. Now you brought in Ryan Carr. The staff did a great job of filling in the portal with guys who are. This is a much more talented roster than last year, and you filled in the weaknesses. You got your big guys. You got your guards who could handle the ball in depth there. Hopefully, they bring in another shooter or two, but they've got 2 more spots on the roster. We'll see what they do there. But this is a far better roster than it was last year. Are they going to be the next Michigan? Probably not. You go into a postseason where anything can happen. And so saying that they're going to be the next Michigan is probably a little insane, but there's no reason that Indiana can't be in the top third of the Big Ten. There's no reason why Indiana shouldn't be a top whatever in the tournament comfortably, whether that's a 6 seed, 5 seed, 4 seed, whatever. If you're in the top 24 there and you're comfortably in, it's not like, oh, hey, we got in because they expanded the tournament. But all those excuses are gone now. There is no safety net. This is You took away the variables of, well, we didn't have the right roster, we're new to the league. No, now you know if it's coaching or not. And if you don't make the NCAA tournament this year, it's clearly on coach, and something's going to have to be done. Will it be done? I doubt it. But um, the leash shortens up and the pressure gets very high because you fail. If they had made the NCAA tournament last year, it gives you a little bit longer of a leash. And I thought Darren DeVries wasted an opportunity. You had the opportunity to kind of fly under the radar, cover up your warts, make the NCAA tournament because Indiana football made their run into late January for a national championship, to where you're sitting at 17-9, and nobody. I won't say nobody, but people kind of forgot about the loss at Minnesota. They forgot the loss to Nebraska. If you had made the NCAA tournament, all that kind of goes away. Goes, those were just growing pains. We're fine. We made the NCAA tournament. We're gonna get momentum going into the portal. And had they put together this class coming off an NCAA tournament run, you feel a heck of a lot better. But they didn't. They wasted that opportunity. You had people come back, get emotionally involved with wins over Purdue and UCLA. And then, with all eyes on you, you drop 2 games to Northwestern. Um, you lose at Ohio State. You get blown out by your rival at Purdue. You get blown out at Illinois. And you just didn't look great. And you wasted the cover of night to kind of turn it into, you might be done after year 2 if you don't succeed. So we'll see. I think the pressure's super high. Other people might disagree with me. Um, but it is, this year you have a good roster. We'll see. We'll see where it goes. You have a good roster, an expanded tournament. If you're a 16 seed playing in Dayton or wherever the other site is, it's probably not a great season for you if you're Darren DeVries. But if you're comfortably in a 6 seed or higher, top third of the Big Ten, which means you're in the top 6 in the Big Ten. It's a tough league. You're feeling, you're like, okay, we could get this thing rolling. But if you can't do that, then it's, well, maybe the coach isn't working. We've tried everything else. We gave you a ton of money. We got the roster fixed. Now what's the other variable? Well, it's the coach. All right. Speaking of coaches on the hot seat, let's get to baseball. I'll give you my honest answers here. So from X, from the portal or reportal, this is Jeff Mercer's contract year. I haven't been able to confirm that, but I will take your word for it. IU baseball has struggled in a bad way the last few years. Who is coaching Indiana baseball in 2027? Let me expand on the question on where Indiana baseball stands right now. Jeff Mercer was brought in 2019 by Fred Glass and dubbed the Brad Stevens of baseball. I don't like his style of coaching. I don't like his style of managing. I'm an old school baseball guy for not being an old dude. It's a simple game. You hit the ball, you throw the ball, and you catch the ball. That's really all baseball is. Now you could get into the weeds on spin rate and exit velo and positioning the defense and things like that. But if you cannot hit, throw, and catch, you're not a good baseball team. And Indiana can't do any of those things at the same time, apparently. And I'll include running the bases in there as well. Too many times this season, and I counted them up yesterday, this team has blown 10 games where they were leading after the 6th inning. 10 games. They're sitting at 21 and 29. A couple of those were against top teams. North Carolina, the easy ground ball to end the game, guy throws it away. LSU, bullpen blows a game late in the game. Now it ended up being 15-8 or whatever it was. But they had a multi-run lead late in that game, and the bullpen just totally collapsed. Um, this weekend against Purdue, and Purdue's a borderline NCAA tournament team. Uh, you had an 8-0 lead on Friday night. You had a home run go off a Purdue player's glove and or head. Uh, you lose that game 11-9. You come back the next day, you have a 4-0 lead. Going into the ninth inning, you lose 5-4. Sunday, 2-0 lead. Purdue comes storming back, takes a big lead. IU comes storming back, takes a 1-run lead, and then all of a sudden, late in the game, they blow that lead. And I know there's people saying, well, it's the hitting, it's not the pitching, it's unfair to blame the pitching. It's everything. On days that they pitch, they don't hit. On days that they hit, they don't pitch. On days that they hit and pitch, they don't field. You cannot win games like that. And this is not the go-to excuse for everybody for Indiana baseball is that they're a cold weather team. They don't get to practice outside, and you can't play baseball like that. You can't. It's absolute nonsense. I grew up in the Northeast. I played baseball for what is the best high school baseball program in New York State now. It was cold. I remember games, there's still snow on the field, and we're practicing outside. There's still snow on the field during games in March, and you catch the ball the wrong way in the palm, you can't feel your hand for a week. That's not an excuse. There are if you're a good coach, there are drills to come up with. Hey, he coached at Wright State, which is in Ohio. That's not a warm weather state. So what are you doing? With other work to track fly balls, to take grounders. It's an AstroTurf field. You're not playing on a dirt field where the ground is frozen, or it takes a bad hop off of a clump of dirt. You're playing on an AstroTurf field. You get access to Mellencamp Pavilion, which is an AstroTurf field. Work on your things. I would get it if you go, hey, we haven't seen the pitching that we see early in the season, and it's tough to catch up to some of these guys who are major league prospects. And that's the same true in the major leagues. The offense always trails behind the pitching because you need time to get the offense going. But for IU, all of this stuff is self-inflicted wounds. The pitching you had multiple games where they're walking double-digit guys and hitting 4 or 5 batters. You're telling me you can't clear off a mound and throw outside? It is inexcusable. You fired your pitching coach, you brought one in, and nothing changed. That's the equivalent of firing a coordinator in football as a last-ditch move to save your job. So I don't think Jeff Mercer should be coaching in 2027. Will he? I don't know. I don't know if they're going to pull the plug, but they should. And I'll go back to that Kentucky regional, and this is all I had to see from Jeff Mercer. The Kentucky regional where Indiana had the 1-0 lead in the final series, games-wise, and they punt the second game with a chance to put a rival team out of their misery and go to a super regional. You throw out a bullpen day and get hammered and say, oh, we have our starter go on regular rest the next day. Like, come on. That to me is more inexcusable than dropping a fly ball. That tells me all I need to know about the mentality of your program. We'll get them tomorrow. We're okay. There's no sense of urgency. None. They run the bases poorly. They pitch poorly. They have some good hitters. And look, there is too much talent on these teams to not make the Big Ten tournament this year or not make the NCAA tournament. There's there's too much talent. You had 30, and some of these guys were Chris Lamona's recruits, and I get that. But you had 30 guys drafted to the MLB since Jeff Mercer was hired. You had your star pitcher transfer out because of Jeff Mercer to Indiana State and help them lead them to a super regional. You had Andrew Wiggins, who's an in-state player, go to NC State. And he was very good. You had Devin Taylor, who's killing it in the minor leagues with Oakland. And he didn't use him right. It's the Jeff Mercer era needs to end. He overcomplicates a simple game. You just throw strikes. It'd be one thing if you lost games 15-8 because your pitcher you let up 8 home runs because your pitchers just don't have the stuff. Instead, you're giving up 15 runs because your pitchers can't hit the strike zone, or you're trying to hit a strike zone, the side of the strike zone like that. And well, that's how you walk 8 guys. That's how you hit 5 batters in a game. There's a lot of talent, and I like the talent makeup on this baseball team. It's young. Um, they're starting to hit better as well, but there's again going back to what I said with DeVries, things have changed. What's the one constant? Coach. It's coach. I'm done with the excuses of it's cold weather. You have an indoor facility that you get to use. It's a turf field. You're not playing on grass or a dirt infield that could take bad bounces. You're playing on turf. Throwing the ball from second base to first base, that has nothing to do with that. You were outside one day for preseason practice. Figure it out. You're getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to do drills that we were doing in high school that make teams good. Figure it out. It's not complicated. Everybody tries to overcomplicate baseball. Baseball is a simple sport. You hit the ball, you catch the ball, and you throw the ball, and you run around the bases. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's not complicated. Hitting a baseball is one of the hardest things to do in the sport, and Indiana is usually good at that. They're good at the most difficult thing in baseball. It's all the rest of the stuff that they stink at. And it's the same mistakes year after year after year after year that has you like, what are we doing? And whatever, the pipeline from Mercer to the Indiana Bulls, it's not worth the squeeze anymore. Well, Indiana baseball is not going to make a gazillion dollars. They'll probably not turn a profit, things like that. But you have a nice stadium. People want to come out and drink beer and watch baseball. It's fun to take your kids, and people are starting to leave it. It's not worth paying for season tickets, and season tickets aren't expensive. They're not. They don't want to support this guy anymore. It's time to move on. Now, who's coaching Indiana baseball in 2027? I haven't dove into that, but there is one guy who used to coach Indiana baseball who is not employed right now, who would probably come back. We'll see. Let's end on a positive note instead of Indiana baseball, because they stink. Let's end on a positive note. Some notes coming up from Indiana football. This might not actually be positive for some people. Indiana's game against Northwestern was moved to Friday night on Fox. That's September 25th. It's an 8 p.m. game. The positive out of that, it gives me one more Saturday to watch college football. But a lot of people don't like it. I get it. It's high school. What I don't like about it is that you tell people in May and They've booked hotels, they bought tickets, they put deposits down for season tickets, thinking that they would be able to go to a Saturday game as well. So that's my problem there. You should have the TV schedules coming out um, sporadically. Fox just put out a couple of games yesterday. NBC should be coming out here soon. That TV draft, I wish they would put it on TV because it'd be a lot of fun. But that TV draft is happening. Indiana was at the White House yesterday. We had it covered for on SI as well. And then, of course, we have basketball portal. Softball is heading to the NCAA tournament for the fourth straight year. They take on Virginia at um, 8 p.m. on Friday night on ESPN2 in the Knoxville Regional. So they're in the postseason. They're a fun team to watch as well. So get on board with them. Volleyball should be good as well. And there's been some big announcements with Big Ten volleyball with their tournament coming to coming to the Fishers Event Center in November. And then the expectations for Indiana volleyball are super high too. So a lot of positives in Indiana sports, but also there are things to be concerned about as well. That does it for today's show. We'll be back talking about football here after Memorial Day. Our countdown to kickoff starts in the next couple weeks. Jamie Jordan and I will have a weekly Indiana football podcast coming up as well. TJ and I will be back previewing the season coming up. Football season is just around the corner. It is like 116 days away. Basketball has their trip to Peru in late July, early August. That should be fun to watch. It should be on YouTube. We could actually watch it this year and not have to rely on people's texts from Puerto Rico. But that gives us something to watch and get us to football season, which will hopefully carry us well into January and things like that. So thank you for joining it. To all of you who have sent in questions, thank you. We'll do another mailbag soon, probably after some recruits start committing. Don't expect a ton of stuff coming until maybe June. Maybe this weekend you get one, but I don't think you're going to have a big recruiting commitment weekend until late June, early July. But you might get one or two here coming. So you can follow us on Twitter at Hoosier _Huddle. You can follow us on Facebook as well. Instagram at Hoosier _Huddle. I think Facebook is the official Hoosier Huddle page. And then TikTok as well. Again, we have moved to Believe, and it's spelled Believe without the E at the end. BLEAV. It's on the screen, but if you're listening on podcast, you obviously can't read the screen. So it's BLEAV. It helps us distribute podcasts as well as get some ad revenue too, and bring in better guests. So you don't have to listen to me for 53 minutes talking about stuff. So enjoy the rest of May. Indiana softball takes on Virginia, 8 o'clock, ESPN2 on Friday night. That is a big game. And then we'll be at Victory and Vision in Night with Indiana on Thursday, and we should have a write-up about that. But if you're going to that, stop by and say hi. That's up at the Palladium in Carmel. So thank you for listening. Download us, leave us a review, and share us with your friends.